This is no longer a vacation. It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
The 1980s were a one-of-a-kind decade in many different ways, but for the movie industry it would be a decade of explosive growth as VHS would come into play. More movies than ever were being played in theaters, and even more movies were being made for the home entertainment markets. And as a result, the 80s would deliver some of the most iconic and at the same time some of the most absurd films in cinematic history. It seemed like any idea imaginable was turned into a movie, and I'm going to break down my top 100 movies from the decade. We're diving into action, comedy, suspense, horror, and so much more. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the plot details. I will leave synopsises for all these films down in the comments just to make this video flow a little bit faster. So let's have some fun. Let's jump into films 100 through 91. To kick this list off at 100 is a movie about a man so vicious they don't even let him carry a gun. He's a man who's no talk and all action because he is Action Jackson from 1988, starring Carl Weathers, Craig T. Nelson, Vanity, Sharon Stone, and film legend Bill Duke. Now, Action Jackson does follow the typical formula for 80s action, but Weathers is fantastic as this tough-as-nails cop seeking vengeance against an auto tycoon. It's filled with loads of over-the-top action and plenty of comical one-liners. Weathers is chasing down cars, he's throwing guys out of buildings and into other buildings, and he's just kicking ass from start to finish. And Craig T. Nelson, yeah, admittedly he is a seemingly weak villain to Weathers who's just jacked in this movie, but it still is Craig T. Nelson, so he makes it work. He delivers a delightfully sadistic heavy. I think this movie should have easily gotten a sequel because Weathers was just larger than life, but it's all for naught. His charisma as an action star will always be remembered in Action Jackson. I have another cop movie for my 99 pick, but this one's a little bit different. They're lean, they're mean, and they're obscene. They're the new recruits of Police Academy from 1984, starring Steve Guttenberg, G.W. Bailey, Kim Cattrall, George Gaines, and many others. Now, slapstick humor is certainly an acquired taste, but I think when done right, the result can be a very satisfying treat. I think this movie just thrives on its cast of excellently performed human cartoon characters. A simplistic but charming love story between Guttenberg and Kim Cattrall cements the silliness with a group of bumbling but lovable characters, each with their own quirks that can appeal to you. This movie is a little bit raunchy, it's a little bit cheesy, and it certainly is dated, but I loved this movie as a kid. It still delivers some fun now. I wanted to be Mahoney growing up. I thought he was just so cool and confident. There's a blend of action and endless amounts of dumb laughs, from dialogue to situational humor, and with great performances and writing, I think this is as close to a live-action cartoon as you can get. Coming in at number 98 is a story of two boys that made a pact. As men, they shared a dream. They forged an empire on greed and violence and betrayal. In 1984's Once Upon a Time in America, directed by Sergio Leone, starring Robert De Niro, James Woods, Elizabeth McGovern, Tuesday Weld, Burt Young, and the great Joe Pesci. This would be the final film in the career of Sergio Leone, and I think it's a bit overlooked. It isn't as flashy or as stylish as other gangster movies, but the life-spanning saga that it explores will compel you. The performances are just impressive. Everybody really pours themselves into these characters. The production design, the makeup, the wardrobes, it's all immaculate, just making this movie kind of feel like a time capsule. But, I mean, the arcs of the characters is where the true intrigue in this movie is to be found. This is when the characters are getting to play in these roles to Leone's direction, and it's awesome to watch. There are various cuts of this movie. The condensed American cut is not that good, but the near 4-hour restored version is a journey of life, friendship, greed, and betrayal that is not to be missed if you haven't seen it. Next up for my number 97 pick, I have a tension-filled neo-noir thriller from 1985 directed by William Friedkin. It's called To Live and Die in L.A., starring William Peterson, Willem Dafoe, Darlan Flugel, Dean Stockwell, and another film legend, John Turturro. I think To Live and Die in LA just thrives on its sexy and seductive atmosphere. It just lives and breathes LA during the era, and it's a gritty backdrop that's just captured with elegance, I think. Peterson is a very capable lead. He delivers the just pure pulse of a rogue agent on a mission for justice, and a young Willem Dafoe is the shining light among the bright lights of LA. I think Dafoe brings this film such an appealing wild card character. He's alluring but sadistic. He's good at what he does, and he's completely intriguing to watch. The blend of storytelling and character development and action, I think, is silky smooth throughout this runtime, and they just don't make these artistic flicks much anymore that deliver both style and substance. We're sticking in California for my number 96 pick. I have a movie about a kid who heads out to LA for the summer. He lives to thrash, he loves to compete, but the competition is a killer in the 1986 skateboard drama Thrashin', starring Josh Brolin, Robert Russler, and Pamela Gidley. There is no doubt Thrashin' captures an 80s skateboarding vibe in LA like a time capsule. It's a simple love story blended with the world of skateboarding and just punk music, and it's a delightfully cheesy ride. Brolin is a charismatic lead, and Russler and his gang of daggers are just a comical group of villains, but where this movie really does shine is in all the skateboarding action. I think the finale at the LA Massacre is just a perfect adrenaline-pumping climax, but throughout this movie there is non-stop action. Professional skateboarders were used, and it results in awesome footage, all set to killer music. Thrashin', I mean, it will admit, it doesn't hide from its shortcomings. It knows what it is. I think it embraces the campiness, and it really does hit all the boxes in the genre, but none of it hinders the appeal of Brolin's magical summer in LA. We're venturing into the world of bartending for my number 95 pick, following the rise of a college kid so talented that when he pours, it rains. We're talking about 1988's Cocktail, starring Tom Cruise, Brian Brown, Elizabeth Shue, and Kelly Lynch. Now sure, Cocktail is a superficial flick and it does glamorize bad behavior, but it was the 80s after all. Brian Brown shines in this film as he trains Cruise on life's wisdoms. He's a shitty guy nonetheless, but through Brown's performance, I think you can see the appeal and sympathize with where he's at in his life just a little bit. Cruise is definitely charming, and together he and Brown are a charismatic duo for this film, because when the music is pumping, the bottles are flying, and the drinks are being poured, this film's an absolute blast. It's a sexy movie. It's provocative in the most surface level of ways. It's a textbook guilty pleasure. Elizabeth Shue is great as the young love interest. She's really the only truly likable character in this movie, but it doesn't stop this journey of wild nights and tragic repercussions from entertaining. Now back in the 80s, we knew who to call when we had ghosts, but who did you call when you had monsters? That would be my number 94 pick, The Monster Squad from 1987, directed by Fred Decker, starring a ragtag group of kids sort of like the Goonies did a couple years earlier. Now I think this movie is a blend of the Goonies and Ghostbusters, and I guess you could say a little bit of Stand By Me tossed in there as well, but when added with the world of cinema's legendary monsters, it's a charming adventure. The practical effects are quite good. I remember this movie feeling so real as a 10-year-old movie geek. It was like a darker version of the Goonies. It just felt a little bit edgier at the time, and I loved that. The young cast is certainly charming, and I actually think their flaws as young actors only makes them feel like more authentic kids. It's a bit humorous, it's filled with tension and adventure, and when the monsters come into play and the suspense kicks in, this movie is a blast. The pace is quick, it reeks of 80s cinema, and despite its flaws, I think it's a nostalgic classic. Now my number 93 pick is about the best bouncer in the business. His nights are filled with fast action, hot music, and beautiful women. It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it, and that would be Patrick Swayze in the 1989 classic Roadhouse, also starring Sam Elliott and his mustache, Kelly Lynch, and Ben Gazzara. Now, what can you say about Roadhouse other than it's just magically fucking ridiculous? It's an 80s action romp that feels like something ripped out of the 70s. Swayze is just kicking ass and keeping it cool and really just soaking up every scene in this role, and it's just absolutely amazing in the cheesiest of ways. Sam Elliott and his legendary stash are a great sidekick. Lynch simmers as the love interest. It's filled with one-liners, boobies, sex, and endless waves of textbook barroom brawling. Gazzara steps in as a comically vile villain. He has an endless stream of henchmen for Dalton to take out, and despite this film's flaws, the gratuitous violence, the unintentional humor, and Swayze just pull you in and make you love it. Moving along to my number 92 pick, I have a sweet little love story about a couple of kids named Lloyd and Diane. To know Lloyd is to love him, and Diane is about to get to know Lloyd in the 1989 Cameron Crowe rom-com Say Anything, starring John Cusack, Ione Skye, John Mahoney, and Lily Taylor. Now, to me, Say Anything is just a charming, down-to-earth, humorous, surprisingly endearing coming-of-age love story. Cusack is excellent in this film. He elevates the material with ease as the wandering teenager that's teaching kids how to kickbox. It's a classic loser meets brainiac love story, and the chemistry between Cusack and Skye make it work. They have an appeal together. They're both down-to-earth. It explores young love through humor, and it cuts in just enough sentimentality to make it all resonate with you. The story is really simple. It focuses, I think, on the heartfelt core of the characters and what's going on in their lives. It doesn't veer into overloaded cheesiness or melodramatics, and Say Anything to me is simply just a cute story with a rockin' soundtrack that can make you feel good anytime you hit the play button. And for my final movie in this video, we're going to go international for my number 91 pick. I have the 1986 comedy Crocodile Dundee. Paul Hogan is Crocodile Dundee. He comes from the Australian outback and is about to survive in a different kind of primitive land, New York City. I think people tend to forget how massive of a hit this movie was, bringing in over $328 million on just a $9 million budget. I don't really see any film of this type being able to pull that type of money in the theaters anymore, and I think it was definitely well earned because despite its genre cliches, it's just a naturally charming and easygoing story to have fun with, and as unassuming as he was, I think Paul Hogan was the definition of the everyman. I think there was something in him that anybody could relate to, which just made the routine blend of fish out of water tropes with romance and humor and action work to deliver a great time. I mean, you know where the plot is going, but there's a cleverness in the writing. I think it allows the comedic setups to land very effectively to keep the laughs fresh and to keep the pace of the movie moving, and as gimmicky as it is, watching Dundee find love will inevitably put a smile on your face if you haven't seen this movie, and it's going to put a smile on your face even if you know what's going to happen. And that's it for this video today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. These are all enjoyable movies in their respected genres. Let me know if you've seen any of them and what you thought of them down in the comments below. Also, be on the lookout for the next video in my Top 100 of the 80s series, where I'll be covering films 90 through 81. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you at the movies.